Change may be inevitable, but hope gives me the strength to meet it on my own terms.
Hey everyone, so today I'll be breaking down how to use Kitty Pryde effectively in the new side quest Incursions event. So the first thing I'd like to go over is the teams. Now, I like to use quite a variety of teams in Incursions, but with this, it's quite narrow and you can quite easily pick how you want to set up your team depending on how you want to approach the entire side quest as a whole. So going over the teams, I'd say these are the 5 best, teams to use or outlines for teams that you can use to help you better in the side quest. Now I'd like to break them all down one by one. First, here we have Kitty Pryde, Black Widow Clairvoyant, and Tigra. These will primarily cover a lot of ground for you. Clairvoyant will cover most of the immunity side issues that she would have to face, say a bishop, so incinerate, maybe an immortal abomination, so poison, something like that. Tigra, of course, giving Kitty the unblockable, and of course Kitty being your main champion is going to be on all of these teams. So that is one team that you could use. Now, instead of Clairvoyant, you could use a couple other people on the team, such as Warlock or Ultron, who also have quite the same amount of immunities. So that's primarily one of the teams you want to go with if you want to play more defensively. Now, on the second team right here, we have Kitty Pryde, Mags, and Tigra. So again, Tigra will give Kitty the unblockable charge, and Mags will pretty much be able to counter a lot of champions on the path. Around 60 to 70 champs in the game, if I'm not wrong, are #metal champs, and you'll face quite a bunch of them as you go along the path. So Mags was definitely a great use. He's also one of the best Viv Vision counters. I'd say the best is Galan. So if you'd like to use Mags solely for Viv Vision, then that can also work, but he can also counter a lot of other champs on the path. The next team right here is Kitty Pryde, Mags, and Professor X. Mags and Kitty Pryde will obviously fulfill the same purpose they fulfilled already, but Professor X can work as a support champion for the two, along with the fact that they both synergize with each one another. So now they'll be able to give even more help to each other, along with the fact that you can of course use Professor X in most of the Incursion side quests if you're skilled enough with him. The next team we have right here is Kitty Pryde, Mags, and CGR. Now this is the team I use the most, and the best thing I'd suggest right here if you'd want to change up is CGR. Because the thing with CGR is I usually take him into the Incursion side quest with this team, usually because he is my main DPS champion, though you can use a lot of other DPS champions such as Hulkling or maybe Galan if you have him, for example, but Galan could be swapped in for Magneto as well if you're good enough with other metal champs that you could face besides Viv Vision, and characters such as that, high DPS characters who can also fill in major roles. So here we have our 5th team, which is Kitty Pryde, Ultron, and CGR. Now, I primarily use this team solely to clear out my objectives, and they helped quite a bunch in that aspect. But I wouldn't suggest Ultron really over Mags or CGR or any sort of high DPS dealing champion instead of CGR, because although Ultron has double immunities, the thing is his ramp up does take a little bit of time depending on what approach you're trying to go with, and regardless of that, you primarily want to bank on him being more versatile, and he is versatile with a lot of hacks. But considering the fact that you're gonna be able to get a lot of use if you have an Awakened Kitty, chances are you won't need him, but certainly you can use a robot champ, again like Warlock as I stated previously with Black Widow Clairvoyant or Clairvoyant herself, so that they can fill the place of immunities. Now again, the main things you want with this are of course Kitty, because she'll be on your team regardless. The second thing you want is a big DPS champion like CGR as I've used, and really a third champion can be anyone of your choice. a counter for most of the other champions you could face on the path, so I took Magneto, or another champion who could really assist in the underlying fights, so Clairvoyant or Ultron for immunities. Now let's discuss the hacks. So the hacks that I would recommend out of the base hacks that we've had for years now is Pyrokinetics, Martial Artist, Entropic Shield, Strategic Movement, Perpetual Offense, and Toxic Advance. Now, all of these are really helpful in terms of clearing most of the areas that could help you with Kitty Pryde. But some, keep in mind, will tie in with how your Kitty Pryde has been affected by the newer hacks and what hacks you've gained from them. For example, with Toxic Advance, it's really great, but for Toxic Advance you either need the hack or you need the Tiger Synergy for them to be primarily useful. Otherwise, most of your Toxic Advance value will only be coming out on the SP2, which isn't that great once you look at how crazy it can be with alternating enhance. Strategic Movement and Perpetual Offense will be greatly helpful to you in most circumstances. Because the things with Strategic Movement is it can really work with any sort of champion. You just need to have fast hands, and eventually while building up a lot of charges, I'd suggest somewhere on the range of around 14 to 19. You can just pretty much dash into the opponent, do a couple of hits, and they should be out if you have a high enough kitty and you're on a reasonable enough zone. And with Perpetual Offense, it works quite well considering that Kitty is a prowess champ, along with the fact that launching a special attack with her is going to be pretty casual and you can gain some major damage from it. Entropic Shield also works quite well because the amount of block proficiency and bleed that you get from it can help you quite a bit if you're more of a less advanced Kitty player, because chances are you'll be more defensive with her rather than being offensive, which is the primary style that you want to use with Kitty. Now, Martial Artist works quite well with Kitty as it would with really any other champion, though I would say that Martial Artist is one of the more lower tier boss module hacks, because although it gives you a good amount of attack rating, offensive combat power rate, along with the buff and debuff duration, it's not that extremely useful as the others are when paired up with other hacks, so do keep that in mind. Now, Pyrokinetics is extremely useful for Kitty. I've said this in multiple videos myself, but Pyrokinetics can really help you out when going into incursions, because the amount of incinerates you'll gain with Pyrokinetics will definitely contribute to your temperature meter, and that will give you much increased prowess potency, giving your Kitty a ton of damage. So definitely include picking Pyrokinetics up if you see it. Now I'm gonna go over the new hacks that I would recommend. So first, we have alternating enhancements, Armor Burst, Draining Degeneration, At the Ready, Poisonous Truth, Proud Degeneration, and finally All Out Effects and All Out Attack. Now, Armor Burst I'd highly recommend because if you're a less advanced Kitty player, then it can certainly help you, especially because it'll give you more defensive help, along with the fact that your special attacks will deal more damage, allowing you to get fights quickly done. Now, Draining Degeneration is quite a tough one because it does involve some mastery. You do have to knock down the opponent quite a few times with the heavy attack in a fight, but if you can get it down quite well, then it can definitely help you because it deals a huge chunk of damage, and if you have a relic equipped with it, then it can really just melt down any of your enemies that you come across, as long as you're careful enough. Now, Alternating Enhancements is one of, if not the best hack in my opinion from this new Incursion side quest, because if you pair it up with Toxic Advance, even on its own, but it's pretty good, but if you pair it up with Toxic Advance, it is absolutely insane. The amount of poison damage that it deals is crazy, and it will just melt all your opponents. You know, if they have 200,000, 300,000 health pools, it'll just melt them down within like 17 or 19 seconds. It's crazy. Now, At the Ready is a pretty peculiar one because unless you have a relic equipped to your Kitty, At the Ready is going to be the most useless one because it really won't help you at all, and it'll just be there as a placeholder. So unless you have a relic equipped with Kitty, I'd suggest not taking it. Though if you do, I'd suggest taking it only if you're an extremely defensive player with Kitty. Now, Poisonous Truth isn't as useful as the others, but it definitely is quite helpful in most fights that you'll come across, because the amount of damage that you'll be doing overall, it definitely can be boosted with Poisonous Truth and can definitely save you from a lot of annoying counters and annoying fights that you might have to face. Proud Degeneration is also a highly recommended one, because if you have your Kitty, you'll pretty much be able to completely cheese the entire quest, like with alternating enhancements and toxic advance, as I stated before. With Proud Degeneration, it is just insane, and if you can master landing heavy attacks with Kitty, which is also a pretty tough skill in and of itself, but if you can manage doing that quite well, and you can then launch your special attacks pretty soon, then it'll really be able to help you in most of the fights that you come across, especially if you're fighting like a pretty high health Kate Bishop boss, for example. Now, although this section is going to be quite short, there's quite a good reason for it. If you have an Unawakened Kitty, she's pretty viable in most matchups. She can work quite well with her phasing mechanics. She can avoid all damage while phasing, unless of course it's like an SP3 or some sort of unmissable attack. But if you have an Unawakened Kitty, she can still be quite viable in most fights, and she can greatly help you out along the Incursion run. Now, if you have an Awakened Kitty though, it's a completely different story. I'd say that if you have an Awakened Kitty, she's pretty much a counter to 90% of the fights you'll come across, and she'll be able to get through any fight pretty much that is reasonably doable, along with some fights that may have annoying nodes to them. With Pyrokinetics, you're gonna do more medium enders instead of backdrafting and intercepting, things like that. So I definitely suggest, the only sort of advice I can give on how to fight with Kitty Pryde in the new Incursion side quest is by checking out some guides online. I've seen some pretty comprehensive ones, and I feel like they can definitely help you out a bunch. I'll link them down below if I find any that are quite viable, and I definitely suggest you check them out if you haven't already. Though I will give you two quick, previews of what I would suggest on how you fight the main bosses of this new side quest, which are of course Kate Bishop and Viv Vision. Now, although there isn't many tips I can also give about the entire side quest as a whole, I will say one big tip is, with the new hacks that you were given, you can gain a normal prowess buff, and there's a pretty interesting mechanic with that I'll display right now on the screen. If you have, let's say, like one passive prowess of Kitty's that is naturally in her kit, and let's say you have one prowess from Kitty's basic kit, and you have like two prowesses from one of the hacks you've gained, you can still phase with that, and that goes with any amount as long as they equate to 3 and above. So let's say you have two basic prowess buffs from the new hacks that have come out, and just one prowess at the moment with Kitty's kit, then you can still phase. It's pretty cool, and it's an interesting mechanic that you can definitely use to your advantage. So I definitely suggest keeping an eye out for that and using that on moments where you can. So now to break down the Kate Bishop fight, which I'll be displaying on screen right now. And the main problem with that is, once you intercept Kate Bishop when she's parried, you won't be able to attack her. Instead, she'll counterattack, and she'll stun you and attack you until, of course, the stun runs out. And it's going to be a passive stun, so you can't even purify it. Now, the main way I'd suggest counteracting this is by using the backdraft method with Kitty Pryde, which is attacking maybe 1, 2, or 3 times, and then backdrafting, and then going in again to attack. And if you do this, then most likely you'll be able to easily counter Kate Bishop. And if you have alternating enhancements, or you have the Tiger Synergy by any chance, then that can also greatly help you out, because you can just go unblockable and straight go through her block and attack her immediately without ever needing to parry as a whole. So that's one primary way you can get through her, and if you do that and you can just maintain that, that can also work quite well. though I would suggest being careful if you have her above 1 or 2 bars of power, because then she'll launch her special attack, which will be a big problem for you. But if you follow this routine, you'll pretty much be able to get through her, especially if you have alternating enhancements. And if you just launch your special attacks on time, you can easily just pass her through and it's all good. Though I would say that with her special attacks, she's a bit more complicated, and to avoid her special attacks, I'd say the first thing you should do is on a special one, you can either just dex or attack forefront, and you can easily counter that. I usually just go with the phase. Now, evading her SP2 is a bit more tough, because all I'd suggest is once she's about to launch her first arrow, you phase, then you would backdraft, block, wait for the phase to commence, and then immediately dash back in until the final arrows have dropped. This will most likely give you a good timing and allow you to easily cheese your specials. Though I wouldn't suggest going above 2 bars of power to begin with, I just suggest staying in that one bar of power area and easily countering her as such. Now with Viv Vision, I won't go in much detail because I don't think she's a great Viv Vision counter, because Viv Vision will power burn you quite a bit, and that's a big issue with fighting Viv Vision, and there with no way to counteract that, I don't think that she's going to be a great counter, though I will show it on screen for what it's worth. Since there's no really easy way to counter that power burn, and to launch specials, you pretty much just have to go heavy, and that would take a long while. You'd primarily want to bank on phasing her SP1, though that's also quite tough because of how fast paced it is, and I've noticed how hard to dex it is at times, so that's definitely going to be an annoying factor there as well. But it's going to take a little bit of a while for you to burn through Viv Vision. Now here it took me about 3 minutes to defeat Viv Vision, which I'll condense for the sake of viewing time. It is quite sad to see comparatively to the amount of time it took me to defeat Kate Bishop, which was just above 1 minute. So it is quite tough to go against Viv Vision because of how much her utility is stacked up against Kitty Pryde. So I definitely suggest not taking her against Viv Vision. Instead, I'd suggest using someone who can easily counter her, like Galan or CGR if you're good enough, or Magneto, of course. Now that's really all I have for you at the moment here, because we're so far in the first week of the side quest, and this is all the sort of data and findings that I've gathered from all my fights that I've done with Kitty Pryde, and I feel like this is the most effective guide I can make so far. I don't think there's much I could do to really enhance this guide anymore, because these hacks were primarily the big thing that came through with this event, and I feel like covering them is the most important part, and I feel like I've done that, so there's not much more I could say. I just say that you take the hacks I've told you about, and that you now can fight with Kitty in a more alternative way with how they are being presented to you. So hopefully this helped all of you and wasn't too confusing, since this is my first video making a guide on Kitty Pryde. But yeah, that's about